you'll probably remember from a couple of weeks ago that the Lionesses came out, then they won, and it's amazing. But it wasn't quite amazing 2 weeks ago because the BBC, their initial response was that they were too white, and I think Callum played this. But let's just have a recap on it.
An historic 8-goal victory for England last night as the Lionesses secured their place in the quarter-finals. But all starting 11 players and the 5 substitutes that came onto the pitch were all white, and that does point towards a lack of diversity in the women's game in England, and it's something that Alex Scott has been investigating.
Terrible.
I mean, I feel like this isn't representing our beautiful country as it is right now.
I know.
If it's not 100% diverse, if it wasn't a number of women just running out on the pitch in full hijabs,
It's
then what's
sickening.
even the point?
I know. So the BBC's immediate response was to be racist against white people because that's what they love. And so
That's their first response for everything.
Exactly. Why not? So we immediately saw, okay, it looks like the football is now going to be the new site of the culture war, and that's really what's happened. But that one didn't go too well, by the way. The BBC received more than 200 complaints for that about racism, which was correct. The Telegraph also covered it, and it was actually 222 complaints, I think, in total. And then the presenter had an explanation about it on Twitter. Can we look at that one, John? Apparently not. That's the Telegraph one. Yeah, that's just BBC hit with racism complaints. So it's good that people complain about it. And then the presenter said, "I'm glad this conversation is happening. Football is a game for all. It's never been about criticising this England team. It's about looking to the future and pathways so girls can all have the same opportunities to be a lioness. Everyone should be a lioness now." So she sort of tried to get out of it with that, but basically she was being racist. So that was the initial response, but then it became the current thing, and suddenly you couldn't even criticise it. And even the BBC looked churlish because it was the current thing and everyone had to support it. And we saw in the Telegraph, Jane Chilling, the Lionesses aren't the same as male footballers. They are far better.
And this is just people reveling in finally people care about women's football.
Yeah.
We need to milk this for all it's worth.
Yeah, and that just seems like a sort of cheap clickbait headline. But to be very fair to it, I read the article and it's much, much worse than the actual headline. And it's so bad I'm not going to go through it because it's actually meaningless. There is nothing of substance in it. She admits, while I have to admit that I lack interest in the sport, end of article really, because you just say you don't know what
I don't
about.
really care about football. You don't see me writing articles for newspapers about it.
Yeah. Why I don't care about football by Harry. It's like, cheers, mate. So that immediately it became the current thing, and even Google could celebrate the flag. And until the other day, if you Google Lionesses, you got an amazing animation with the St. George's Cross coming up. Very base. Google going full Deus Vult mode. It was like, because the Lionesses are so great that they pushed Google to the far right. That's what happened, Harry.
I mean, thinking about it, last year we got the whole, like, diversity is our strength. If England wins the game, diversity will have won it for us. Then, of course, the diversity lost us the game, meaning diverse. So if these guys...
Can't say that.
If these guys win... What does that say? A completely undiverse team wins. What does that say? What do we attribute that victory to, eh?
It's a good point. There's a couple of variables. Yeah, either it's because they're white or because they're women. Let's not go into it. But it was just funny that even Google, suddenly you allowed the flag again. It was not normally allowed the flag, but you could allow them.
Well, it's a sign of fascist dictatorship, don't you know?
I don't know if you can see it on there. It was a bit further down. But anyway, it was a St. George's Cross flag animation. But because it was so...
Oh, yeah,
there
it's
you go.
like a bunch of fireworks
It comes
as
up
well.
and then goes, because it's become the current thing, everyone has to now praise it. And even Gary Lineker was not reverent enough. He put this tweet out, "The Lionesses have only gone and done it, and Kelly is England's heroine, bra none." So this was a pun.
Is she the one who took her top off in that picture?
So he's going for a pun there. Gary's gone for a pun. And to be fair, let's break it down. Bra none. It's not a bad...
Let's explain the joke. That always works.
Because people didn't get it and it got him cancelled. So, sort of cancelled. You can't really cancel Gary Lineker. Too big to fail. But the bar on, I mean, it's not a bad pun on the phrase barn on, right? The problem is he's shoehorned in the phrase barn on. Doesn't really need to be there.
Yeah.
If someone had said a headline that said barn on and then he went barn on, that would be clever. But he's shoehorned in that so he can subvert it.
Well, he obviously was sat smoking a pipe, smoking something at home, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And this popped into his head, and I thought, right, how can I absolutely
reverse
grind this?
engineer this?
Yeah, how can I find a statement that this will fit in?
And to be fair, he's not a professional comedian, but he was a good goal scorer, and now he's become a sort of woke idiot online. But so my only criticism of it is aesthetic. But he got, of course, destroyed for this, and he had to delete it. And there was a piece in the Daily Mail on this where he says that he's had to delete it and he's. Can we
John,
see
do you
that,
mind
John?
moving along? Thank you.
There we go. Many people miss the context. Gary Lineker explains why he deleted bra non-tweet about Chloe blah, 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 after he was accused of casual sexism and puerile jokes in fierce backlash. I can't really see the problem with the joke, but then again, I'm not a total idiot. So
Yeah,
could be that.
I don't get where casual sexism comes into it.
Well, he was condemned by a literal Karen, if we can see that one. Gary Lineker, this is from Karen Ingala Smith. Gary Lineker, please apologise for and condemn the sexist responses to your now deleted, badly judged tweet. He's even got to condemn the responses. Everyone who's responded on Twitter, the thousands of people, condemn them.
I can't believe that I'm being made to feel like I need to stick up for Gary Lineker on this. I feel
I've
dirty.
backed you into that corner. Yeah, metaphorically. He says it was just a play on words given this celebration. I do rubbish like that constantly on here, and I can confirm that is true.
I mean, he only ever spouts rubbish on Twitter anyway, so...
I know, but now he's complaining about context. So, Paul Joseph Watson was having a bit of schadenfreude at Gary Lineker, hosted with his own petard. Gary Lineker currently getting cancelled by the same social media mob outrage mindset he helped create, laughing face. And then he said, for daring to slightly undermine the latest current thing craze, women's football, with a not particularly funny joke, but it was word witty, but we've already deconstructed the joke and said why it wasn't that good. But Nick Buckley was a bit more generous. He's gone with, you can never be woke enough. It's great until you cross the invisible line, then they come for you. Gary is an arse, but should be free to tweet any joke he wants. Correct, really.
I mean, this is correct, but this is... I've got a video coming out relatively soon on this. Whenever, even for these minor infractions, what this is basically just a signal sent out to the rest of the leftist verse to show everybody that where the new line is that you're not allowed to cross. It's basically just rallying the troops for the next cause.
And they presumably need to update that roughly every hour because it is
I mean, this is why they're
changing.
constantly cancelling each other. So
yeah. And the trans rights activists suddenly got on board. Even they were celebrating. Even people like Tom Howard, who is a colleague of my esteemed colleague, Tom Howard, so I can't criticise him too much.
Your famous trans activist colleague, Tom Howard.
He's a great man. But
supporter of trans children in Tavistock.
Yes, he has always supported trans people's rights to be in women's sports. But suddenly he was on board with this, I mean, effortlessly accessorized ensemble here. He's got the face paint on the one cheek, he's got the scarf. I mean, it's great.
He probably wants to watch out for monkeypox as well.
I was going to say, but I'm glad you said it and not me, because I want to keep my job at GB. He would have no problem effortlessly contracting monkeypox there. It's a compliment. I mean, he's a good-looking guy. If you go up to just see what his tweet was, he just put, it was the classic 2 World Wars and 1 World Cup, but it added the and 1 UEFA Women's Euro 2022 final. And
you know that meme of the guy at the bottom of the podium, like checking his medals reel, spraying all of the champagne all over himself. That's what that feels like.
Yeah. And Julia Hartley-Brewer was not having it. You don't support women's sport, Tom. You'd be perfectly happy if the England women's team was made up entirely of 11 trans players who are biological men. That's the policy you support. You can't support women's sport if you believe men can play women's sport. Very good point. She said support too many times for me, but that got 6,000 something likes. It was Tom's tweet was heavily ratioed. Tom came in with the reply. He said, "When have I ever said men should be able to compete in women's sport?" And like crazy face. And it's like, well, you have, Tom, but in his world he hasn't because in his world
trans women are women.
Exactly. And someone just came back, kept the receipts on the 6th of April, Tom. This is when he said it. And they quoted Tom's tweet, and he says, "I agree, biological men should be barred from women's sports. Some trans women, on the other hand, those who have sufficiently changed their biology should be assessed on a case-by-case basis. That's individualism. That's compassion. That's pragmatism. That's the way forward. That's moronic," I would add. But I can't add that because I might get sacked.
Sufficiently change your biology. If there's a trans woman who is lithe and small enough to not absolutely beast all of the biological women, they were already a little manlet and deserve to be treated as such.
Well, yes, they're going to retain the benefits of testosterone and so on. But if you go down, what's the next one we got? Tom had he was heavily relying on his semantics. He basically said, "When I've ever said it," he replied to that saying, that doesn't say men should compete in women's sports. Quite the opposite. So he's relying heavily on his definition. And then Julia's replied again. I'll go back and say, because Julia's replied again. Can we just go back? Oh, yeah.
There
Yes,
we go.
Tom, that's absolutely what
Down
you're
just a
saying.
bit.
There's no surgery and there are no drugs can turn a man into a woman or a woman into a man. Biological sex is immutable. You're not stupid. You know that, really. You just pretend you don't. And Tom's just gone, I'm not going to get into this if you keep saying trans women are men. It's inaccurate, rude, and uncalled for. Heavily ratioed tweet. And a funny one he had, and this is pure just banter, he replied to one person saying, do you overanalyze every major chant? And the phrase, I know you're not that familiar with football, Harry, but no one's ever used the phrase major chant. That's not a phrase. You know, the two awards and one more cup. That's a major chant in songs.
My favourite chants, so let me give you a list of all of the major ones throughout history. These are the groundbreaking chants.
These are the
broke new ground.
canon of chants, yeah, exactly. Absolutely mad. But anyway, that was Tom's take, because it's suddenly the current thing and you want to get on board and everyone wants to celebrate it. My take on it was the opposite. This was a take of pure integrity. I've said it's annoying to see people who've been threatening women's sport by saying biological men should be allowed to compete suddenly support the Lionesses. I'm the exact opposite. I've repeatedly defended women's sport, but I don't want to actually watch it. And I thought
this is the correct opinion.
I thought that showed great integrity. I'm saying absolutely support women's sport, shouldn't have biological men in women's sport, support your rights. Not going to watch because it's a bit rubbish.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Once again, this is a spectacular way to finally get people interested in women's football for a week. That's what this seems like to me. UEFA have done an amazing marketing job on this whole thing.
Oh, yeah, it's brilliant. And everyone is using it to project their own views. So everyone's got their own take. So Julie Burchell, to her, it's a gender-critical triumph. She says in the Mail, what a moment for women. It's an age where our very existence is being denied. The Lioness's glorious show of bold femininity is truly iconic. And she goes on later in the piece, she says, in an age when women's existence is being denied and we're being robbed of our hard-won gains from toilets to trophies by angry trans activists, at a time when our bodies are commodified and picked apart like never before thanks to social media, these bold young women have clawed out new territory. Their spirit signifies new freedoms, new potential for women everywhere. Maybe a bit overstating it, but I see what she's gone with.
I think the spirit of this comment, I do agree with for the most part. In an age where they are being denied their own existence, it's good that they're going out and winning things.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm not so misanthropic that I couldn't agree with that. This next part I thought was a bit of a stretch from Julia. She said, I wonder how many tomboys will now be stopped from taking the journey to the surgeon's scalpel, searching for a way to excise their shameful femininity, now that femininity is shown as such a bold new way of being. I mean, I hope that's true. I think mainly Tavistock closing is more to do with that. I don't know if that's true. It could be true. It'd be great if it is.
I'll also say, I don't think sport activity in general is a feminine method of expression. I think all sports, for the most part, I don't know if you've got, Olympic washing or anything like that, but most
outrageous scenes.
Most sport is very masculine, and I think these women, it's fantastic that they've done it, but they've succeeded in a masculine area.
Yeah, normally I come on a podcast and I'm the most misogynist, but Harry's absolutely blown me out of the water today.
Have you been on with Carl yet?
So she also had a pop at the BBC, though, which I liked. She said the Lionesses should consider giving their future matches to a commercial station, then the poor, noble BBC won't have the awful lack of diversity on their conscience. So I thought that was lols. But yes, of course, some people didn't like her piece and saw transphobic dog whistles. Someone said here, of course the Daily Mail sent us transphobic dog whistles on its front page story. Julie Burchell can't just enjoy the England win without spitting spiteful rhetoric towards trans people and others. So basically,
and if they'd won, your side would have been spitting hateful rhetoric towards biological women. So
yeah, women's football is currently a Rorschach test for your politics. So Julie Burchell sees gender critical feminist triumph. The BBC, it's racist. To trans people, the response is transphobic. And me, as a classical misogynist, just won't watch. And if you don't know what a classical misogynist is, we believe in the free market, but women shouldn't be allowed in it. It's a classical misogynist. It's completely legitimate.
Classic, but pre-women's suffrage. That sounds beautiful to me. Property-owning men past a certain age. That's who gets a say.
With property. Yeah. And obviously politicians are jumping on the bandwagon. Liz Truss is going to channel the spirit of the Lionesses. If we can see the video where she said that at the hustings the other day, the one before. There we go.
I will channel the spirit. And I was at Wembley last night watching the Lionesses. I will channel the spirit of the Lionesses who fought bravely against the odds and got things done and delivered a massive, massive victory. And that's what we can do. That's what we can do for the United Kingdom as we unlock our potential against the plastic patriot, Keir Starmer.
So I love the idea they got things done, which just happens to be Liz Truss's campaign slogan. Did they really get things done? I mean, they won a match. It makes it sound like they were productivity ninjas. They won a football match or a few football matches. It's just funny. And then Ricci, of course, jumped on a bandwagon. Fairly generic tweet. They haven't just won the tournament. They've won the hearts of the whole country with one of his classic, slightly cringy
This obviously
pictures.
staged photo, right?
Yeah. Sticking his finger up slightly aggressively. And of course, the equal pay people came out as well, such as this lady who's a Cambridge barrister and a feminist barrister, or whatever that is. She said, I'm absolutely loving women's football, but equality means they must be paid the same as men. Massive pay gap in football, less than 50k for women and millions for men. Could be some reasons for that. We'll look at in a minute. But the NHS nurses said the same thing. They said, now pay women the same as men and we can really celebrate. And I thought, men generate so much more money in the man's game. Obviously, the only way you could possibly think that is if you're a socialist. But luckily, I went to their page and they say a group of socialist nurses working in the NHS. So they are literally socialists. So,
yes, at Socialist NHS.
Yeah, I realised, okay, fair play.
So I'm going to trust this person's opinion. Maybe not.
But at least they've come out and said it, because the only way you can believe women should get paid the same as men is if you're footballers, if you're a total commie. That's the only possibility. Because if you look at this article, men, just one small example, in the 2019 World Cup, 2018, men, there were 3 times more viewers for the men's, and the men made 45 times more revenue. And that's just one example. The Premier League made 10 billion from TV alone last year.
A question: how many women do you see wandering about wearing football shirts with female football players' names on them?
Good point. But it is very new, to be fair, but it's absurd to say they should be paid the same. The Mirror has Premier League made 10 million from TV. Do we have that one? Doesn't particularly matter. Yeah, there you go. And women's clubs, in fact, operate at a loss, it turns out, as well. Do we have that piece? There you go. FIFA survey reveals 70% of women's soccer clubs operate at a loss. So not much money in the women's game. And that's another critique of people who are getting really into the Lionesses. It's like, well, where were you when were you supporting the club teams? Because no one actually goes to watch women's club football. So actually, you should support it by going to that. Anyway, I know I'm supposed to like the women's game, and I'm sure it's great and amazing. I summed up my feelings here in this tweet. I said, this new obsession with women's football makes me sympathise with people who don't like normal football. I get it now, guys. And of course, the phrase normal football was incendiary, frankly, wasn't it?
Oh, dear.
it was a little bit of trolling. But I feel much like Paul Joseph Watson here when he says, me watching women's football in the re-education camp. And for the listener, he's got the classic Clockwork Orange eyes pressed open thing. So the only other thing I'd say is I was in the pub the other night after our 5-a-side football game, all men's, sorry, got into the pub and everyone clapped the women's game a little politely at the end because it was North London. And I thought, okay. And then I made a little joke about it to the football lads. And all my jokes were slaying because a table of normies is like an easy crowd for me. I was absolutely slaying. But then I made a joke about the women's football, silence. And I made a joke about the keepers being rubbish. And one of them said to me, oh, Nick, it's moved on so much from there. And I suddenly realised it was the current thing. I'm not allowed to criticise it. And I was like, oh, that's why I started thinking of this section. But I ask, are the keepers really that good, Harry? Because to turn this show into match of the day...
You show me.
Well,
all right,
let's
go
have
on.
a quick look at this video from the semi-final. Boink. I mean, very clever back heel. This was a highly celebrated goal, but let's look at it again. Keeper's got to do better.
Let's get that in slow motion here, John.
Sorry to go Roy Keane on it, but the keeper's got to do better. Look, there's a defender in the way. Oh, straight through the keeper's legs.
The reaction time there was abysmal.
It's shocking. It's shocking keeping. Great goal. But,
but at the end of the day...
Yeah, at the end of the day, fair play to her. The only thing I could... But the keeping is pretty bad. And the only thing I could think of similar in the men's game, I had to go all the way back to 1974. And this is a pure bit of fun, just for the end of the podcast. Dennis Law's goal against Man United. He was a famous Man United striker, one of the greatest of all time. But then he moved to Man City at the end of his career. And he accidentally relegated Man United by scoring this goal. It turned out later they would have been relegated anyway, but they needed to win this match. It was a draw. Then he scores right at the end, and he deliberately tried to miss, and I thought we'd look at it because it's a similar goal.
Turn to Old Trafford at the end of the season to confirm United's relegation.
Lee pulled across for Law! Dennis has done it! And no elation there at all from Dennis Law.
I love that bit. No elation there at all. He was absolutely gutted to put them down, or what he thought at the time was putting them down into the lower league. And if you see the rest of the clip, he says, I was gutted. I was happy with the draw, so I just backheeled it to try and miss, and it went in. But if you compare
So that's why he was so sad.
Yeah, because he relegated his favourite team. But if you look at it compared to the women's one, he's right in front of the keeper. There's no defender in the way. It's still a much better goal, even in 1974. That's all I'm saying. But just
And it was accidental.
exactly. But
I mean,
just
to be fair, the women's could have been accidental as well.
it could have. But just to reiterate, I support the current women.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content we have on the site, such as the Contemplation series, this one on our amazing space exploration. You want to find out what else Josh is putting out, you can follow him on Getter at @Josh_firm on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.